Hi, I asked Raven from allforloveblog.com to have a conversation with me about Leaving Neverland and our thoughts about it. It was a new experience for me and a learning experience. I had never done something like this before, and I had a few hiccups along the way. The first 10 minutes of our conversation was not caught on my recorder. My bad, totally my bad. And secondly, there's a pretty bad playback throughout the entire conversation that I did not know was happening until after we had finished recording. I think I know what caused it. I just didn't realize it at the time. And it's pretty bad. I don't expect you to force yourself to listen to it if it really bothers you. Please don't chastise me or crucify me for it. I'm sorry. I don't think there's anything I can do about it now. And I would still like to share it. But I don't expect you to force yourself to listen to something if it really, really bothers you. But keep in mind, it is pretty bad. Other than that, I really enjoyed this. I thank you, Raven, so much for agreeing to chat with me and lending me your time. And surprisingly, I didn't even touch a lot of topics that I had wanted to talk about. They completely slipped my mind. So maybe leave them for another time, or maybe you'll get to write about them on your wonderful blog. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy.
Okay, is this better?
Uh-huh.
Okay, we are definitely recording now. I don't think we were recording any of what we just said, which is a shame. I'm sorry. So how about we start with an introduction?
Okay.
I know we've been chatting for maybe about 10 minutes, but just I love your blog, but I actually don't know a lot about you.
Okay. Well, what do you want to know?
Well, I actually wanted to talk to you most of all because I feel like we might be on totally separate ends of the spectrum, because I'm actually a very new fan. So how long have you been a fan of Michael Jackson?
Well, that depends if you're talking about my standing years or my years where I just loved his music in general as a casual fan.
You can tell me both.
All right, because as a casual fan, I mean, that goes back to when I was in elementary school. You know, I was in elementary school during the Jackson 5 years.
Okay.
I was a teenager during the Thriller era in the 80s. So, I mean, I came of age when all of that was happening. So Michael has been around all my life as far as that goes. I didn't become, however, a diehard fan until he passed away in 2009.
Okay.
You know, and I've talked about that journey before, how I really became interested in him after he died, because I couldn't understand why I was so grief-stricken when I hadn't been this huge fan in life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had always liked his music, but I didn't follow him.
Yeah. And I actually think a lot of people did that. You know, they kind of didn't really think about it until he was gone.
Right. You don't know what you have until it's gone.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was very curious to learn more about him because he was such an enigma. And, you know, everybody had an opinion on Michael Jackson, but no one seemed to really know much about him. You know, and there were all these unanswered questions, and, you know, did he bleach his skin, or did he have a skin disease, and did he molest children, or did he not molest children? Was he guilty? Was he not? You know, was he this? Was he that? And so I started researching and going on to the fan forums. I just, you know, in the beginning, I was just a lurker. I just wanted to see what the fans were saying. I was very curious, and the more I started learning, the more I was just, my mind was just blown. I was like, wow. You know, I started to realize it's like I never knew this man at all.
Yeah.
And so from there, I actually joined a lot of the forums and started contributing to the discussions. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to write about him. So I realized, every day I was writing these really long posts, and after a while I was like, I might as well be writing a blog about all of this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the blog started after that. Because, and I realized to people that had been following him all those years, maybe all of this was nothing new, but for someone that was just learning all of this, I was just mind blown. And I was like, well, I'm a good writer and I have the platform to be able to write. So I'm like, why not take this information that I'm learning and compile it and put it in a format that other people researching and learning about him can come to. And that was kind of my original inspiration for the blog.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think I love your blog because it's something that when I was first into my deep dive research of Michael, that it's, these are articles that I would find myself writing just for fun. Deep, long essays about what I think and what I feel, not knowing if anyone else would care what I had to say, but just these long, deep dives. And you're one of the rare blogs where I agree with almost everything you've said. Not everyone agrees. Was he asexual or did he like women? A lot of people don't always agree about who they think he was, but yours is one of the rare ones where I'm like, yes, she's got it. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But I haven't read every single one of your blog posts because there's only so many hours in the day. But I think websites like that and all the other fan sites there are so important for new fans like myself who are just now researching, because a lot has been lost to time. So you can't just assume that everybody already knows everything there is to know about Michael Jackson, because new people discover him every day.
Right. And, I grew up in the era of Rolling Stone and Cream Magazine and all of those great rock writers that, like Lester Bangs and people like that. And I'm not saying I'm in that class at all, but, these writers that would write these beautiful, analytic, in-depth articles on these musicians, I loved that. And I always wanted to be that kind of journalist. I wanted to write those kinds of stories. So I think to a large extent the blog kind of gives me that outlet to do that.
Yeah. And not to go off track so much, but I've actually noticed that things people do for fandom can absolutely translate into a job or help prepare you for a job. Like all these people making fan videos and all this. I just noticed throughout my years of being a fangirl online that a lot of these skills that people do just because they love one subject actually teach them how to do things that can really help them get jobs. Anyway, that's just a little tangent. So I didn't know that much about you, but I was kind of correct. You grew up with Michael in your life in some way, shape, or form. I was actually born in 1990, so I was, a kid when all these scandals really started happening, and he wasn't known so much for being the superstar as he was in the 80s.
You would have grown up in the punching bag
exactly
era, Michael.
So I did not. He was not an idol of mine. He was someone that I knew, and I thought he was just weird. And what's so sad is that all of this, all of these tabloid stories and rumors definitely kind of slid into my subconscious as a child, because when I was as young as 4 or 5, I remember talking to my friends and being like, Michael Jackson says he has a skin disease, but he's definitely turning white. Just saying these horrible things as a little kid, because I didn't know any better. And it was all that was fed to me were these, tabloid stories. So, and I'm not even one of those, because I was 18 when he died. I'm not even one of those fans that was like, suddenly his death made me look more into him. I remember his death vividly. I remember where I was. I remember watching it on TV. It was a moment in history. But I didn't go and listen to all of his music. I didn't go and do more research. It was only until last year that some random comment on Reddit, of all places, made me go, hang on, did I even know this person, or was he a completely different person than I thought he was? And then I started doing my research. So I really have only been this interested in Michael Jackson for the last year, not even a full year. It was like June of last year, which I can't decide if it was a good or a bad thing, because I was like knee deep in researching about the allegations when the news of this movie hit. And I was like, oh, I know my shit. I know everything there is to know. But it also was kind of put a hold on me just enjoying getting to know Michael Jackson. So I actually would say that I became a fan of Michael the man before I became a fan of Michael the musician, because I didn't even really listen to his music. So I keep approaching all of these stories and the news about the film from a research the man first. Like, who cares about anything else? Research the man to get at least a small understanding of what really happened, or what might have happened, or what his psychology was, or why he did the things he did, before you make a quick judgment.
Yeah. My feeling on that is I really want to get back to just celebrating his art and music. I mean, that's what I love doing. I don't enjoy this aspect of it, digging into these allegations and so forth. It is interesting to a certain extent, but that's not what I do best. I love to just write about his music and analyzing his songs and what certain songs meant, and that's really where my heart is at. But I feel like right now we kind of have to put all of that on the back burner and tackle what's going on with this movie, because if we don't do that, his legacy is going to be, I won't say it's going to be destroyed. I think that's a little bit of an overstatement, but it's definitely taking some damage from this.
Oh, yeah. I do agree 100% with that. I feel like we've been put on hold. We need to kind of tackle this, and I'm a little worried about what the future entails for being a fan of Michael, and also his own legacy that he worked so hard for. Okay. So now the introductions, I guess, are out of the way. I'm trying to go through in my head the things we talked about when I wasn't recording.
Well, we had talked about our reactions to Leaving Neverland, our personal reactions.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so you finally watched Leaving Neverland yesterday?
Yes. We got it on Friday. I sat down Saturday. I watched it in segments. I watched all of the first part, took a little bit of a break, then came back and watched part 2. But, like I said, after I watched it, I didn't feel so badly disposed towards those people who put out those initial reviews or those initial tweets when they were first watching it, because I kind of understood, it is a very powerfully, emotionally manipulative film. And I think that if you go in and you're not prepared for that, I think that it will have that effect on you. Yeah. Now, if you go in as a biased viewer, let's say, if you go in as someone who is already a Michael Jackson fan and you've researched all this and you already have a strong opinion on these men and their stories, I think that obviously that's going to impact how you view the film. I tried to view it from both perspectives. I tried to put myself in the perspective of, okay, I already know what I feel about their stories. And, of course, I'm sitting here with my notepad in hand waiting to tear them apart. And then every so often I would just put the notes aside and I would say, okay, just watch this as someone coming to it with fresh eyes. Try to see what those people at Sundance saw. And so I did watch it from both perspectives. And, all I'm saying there is it's a very emotionally manipulative film.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's set up as a seduction. In fact, that was one of the notes I made in big letters. I said seduction, is to make his defense of MJ palatable. Because I think that they knew going in that that was a big question people were going to have. You know, why did he defend Michael Jackson, Wade Robson? You know, why did he defend Michael in 2005? Why did he continue to defend him? Why did he only come out in 2013? I believe they went in knowing that they had to cover themselves on this ground.
Oh yeah, it definitely feels like the movie's main purpose is to kind of explain why they didn't come forward sooner. Like it's almost like they went into a room and said, no one's going to believe this guy's unless we clearly paint how they were able to stay quiet so long.
Right, right. I found it very disturbing that they set it up almost like a romance or a love story.
Really?
Between...
like I said before when I wasn't recording, we both had very different reactions, and I'm curious about that. But I actually found it really hard to see the romance and the grooming narrative that everyone else clearly saw. And I think that is a product of my own bias of like knowing Michael Jackson, because most of what they said just seems like something he did with everybody. But if you don't know Michael Jackson, then you're like, oh my God, he was grooming them. And I just couldn't see it.
Well, yeah, because the way they described his relationships with both families and knowing what I know already about him, I mean, that's the way he interacted with everybody.
Exactly.
You know, the long phone calls that would go on for hours and the faxes and the notes. I mean, he did that with all of his friends, and I don't care who you talk to that knew him. They would talk about these phone calls at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and, you know, just that was the way he reached out to people, because he was very lonely in that regard.
Yeah, that was something that, oh, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Well, I think he just preferred the phone as a means of communication. You know, that was his way of reaching out to people, but it could kind of be, I think, on his terms, like, you know, if he calls someone rather than going to their house or having them come to his house or whatever, you know.
He could just hang up the phone if he was done.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you said something that upset me, click. But I was going to say, this is actually something that Peter Tilden brought up on your interview, that he never really let you answer because he wanted to go back to the mothers. You know, he was like, I find it outrageous that he would call these little boys, these 11-year-old boys, and have conversations with them for 4 to 5 hours. And in my head, I'm screaming, he did it with adults. Like most of the, even the mothers in the film say, I would talk to Michael for hours on end. He didn't just talk to little boys on the phone for 4 to 5 hours. He was talking mostly with the parents or with his adult friends. And he did it with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, he did the same thing with Gloria Stein, you know, those, they called them the Gloria tapes. I don't know if those are still on YouTube. Glenda
Stein. Yes, they are on YouTube, and I fall asleep to them sometimes because it's just nice to listen to people chatting. But absolutely, yeah, she was 10 years older than Michael, and he called her, and I was so surprised because he sounds completely adult. He doesn't sound like a man-child, and he chats like I would chat on the phone with one of my girlfriends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to listen to those for hours and just laugh at them. You'd be talking about some crazy stuff.
Yeah. And I think they're a rare insight to who he was, like what these families saw versus what the world saw, and versus probably what his employees saw. So, you know, this is another thing that's like, you point, for people who are believing the film, you point to this and say, like, this is him talking on the phone with a woman and her husband and her children, and there's nothing here that suggests anything nefarious, except for, you know, you have these other families, the Safechecks and the Robsons, who have motivation to lie, saying, oh my God, these phone calls were to groom my children. Yeah. People only know a small thing when they say, okay, so he would call Wade and James and talk to them on the phone for 45 hours. And you have to say, no, 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 look at the bigger picture here. You're only seeing a small part of it. Intentionally.
Yeah. And I think Michael tended to, well, you know, he tended to compartmentalize a lot of himself. Like, this friend saw this part of him, and this friend sees this part of him, and you know, this lady he likes, you know, she sees another side of him altogether. I mean, so I think that he did that a lot as a defense mechanism too, not letting too many people see who he really was.
No, I completely agree that he definitely compartmentalized. I think that actually is one reason that people distrust Michael, because he could put on a different face regarding to what situation he was in. And so people think, oh, if he's that good at acting, you know, that way with these people, then he can definitely be a different person behind closed doors. Whereas I think it was a coping mechanism.
I think so too.
Yeah. It's hilarious when you hear, I forget who it was, some maybe D-list celebrity went to Neverland, and she was like, he was literally an 8-year-old boy playing with these boys, and then turn around and he's this big macho man flirting with me. And someone left a comment in the YouTube comment saying that's because he could literally switch it on with the switch and be the manly man for the woman if he wanted to flirt, and then be the kid when he's playing with kids. He wasn't a man-child 100% of the time. He was fully able to act like an adult when he needed to. He just chose not to most of the time.
Yeah, and I think the whole man-child thing is overplayed. And especially when people take it too seriously. It just makes me laugh when people act like they really believe that. Like, do you really believe this guy? You know, this guy who was smart enough to acquire, you know, Sony ATV, and I mean, the guy that was savvy enough to make all of these mega business deals and sign the biggest contract, the biggest recording contract in music history at that time. You really think that this was some idiot, you know, some child in a man's body?
Yeah, absolutely. I do not like it when people use the term man-child with Michael, because I'm just like, he wasn't. He might have told you that, but he wasn't.
Yeah, my sister, she actually likes the Martin Bashir interview, and we were talking one time, and I was like, how can you even say that? Like, how can you say you like that interview? She's like, yeah, but she's like, listen to, he actually makes a fool out of Martin Bashir.
Wait, what?
She was like, you know, when they were talking about the whole Peter Pan thing and going back and forth, and Michael was like, I'm Peter Pan. And Martin Bashir is like, you're Michael Jackson. No, I'm Peter Pan. And my sister was like, that's brilliant. I was like, okay, that's your opinion, but I wouldn't put that on my list of favorite Michael Jackson interviews. So.
No, but you can definitely tell by the end of Michael and Martin's time together that Michael was done. He was just like, I don't like you. I know you're up to something, but you know, ever afraid of confrontation, went ahead with it. Yeah, I don't know if I would put that in my top list. I don't hate the Martin Bashir documentary. I think it's actually something that people should watch if they're trying to you know, learn more about Michael Jackson, but they have to watch it along with the footage you were never meant to see, and maybe even the Louis Theroux documentary. I mean, I don't love the Louis Theroux documentary, but he makes a good point that everyone around Michael used him, and it helps you understand the situation he was in. So, yeah.
And it helps us understand what's going on now, because that's still what's going on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I forget who do you hate more, Dan Reed or Martin Bashir? And I can't make the choice. I can't. They're both horrible to me.
That would be a hard one.
Yeah. I mean, I think Martin did it to promote his career, and he was like, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I think Dan Reed is on the hunt to take down Michael Jackson and be the one who took down Michael Jackson. So maybe he's worse.
Yeah, this guy's dangerous to me.
Yeah. And I had never heard of him before. So I don't know if this really is another, director looking to make a name off of Michael Jackson, but it seems like he's got a lot of friends in Hollywood who are willing to look the other way, to just take his word at face value. Either that or, HBO or anyone else.
Yeah, I hadn't really heard of him before this either, but apparently he has some good credentials as far as past documentaries that he's done. I haven't watched any of them. They just weren't my cup of tea, I guess.
Yeah. I think I said the exact same thing on Reddit. I was like, that is not my bag. I'm not watching that. But my ears pricked up when apparently the last film that he got a lot of attention for was The Pedophile Hunter. And I'm like, so this guy got a lot of attention for making a movie about pedophiles hiding in your cell phones waiting to snatch up your children. And then now he's making a film about, Michael's dead, so he can't hurt anyone else, but he's making another film about a boogeyman who was secretly hurting all these children and we never knew about it. So it seems like he does kind of enjoy these pedophile angles and might have a bias just from his own history and his own resume in seeing real-life pedophiles in the world and thinking everyone should feel ashamed for how they looked the other way with Michael Jackson. But he's completely convinced that he was a pedophile.
After the little bit of research he supposedly did.
Oh my God, I know. When he said, I had someone do 3 weeks of research, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Me alone, and I'm a new fan, have been doing months of research, and I haven't even scratched the surface. There's no way that people are taking him seriously. And he takes himself seriously by saying, I had someone else do 3 weeks of research.
And this was someone who self-admittedly, as of 2016, really knew nothing about Michael Jackson.
That's another thing. I was in the car with my mother when we were listening to the interview, and when he said, I really didn't know anything about Michael Jackson, we both went, that's bullshit, because who has lived on this earth for the last 30 years and not heard anything about Michael Jackson?
No, I tell you what I think happened. 2016 was when they put out that media hoax about child porn at Neverland.
Mm-hmm.
Wade Robson's attorney team leaked those documents to Radar Online, most of them which were forged.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, of course, as we know, containing images that didn't even exist in Michael Jackson's lifetime. That made a big media splash in 2016.
And we're still feeling it today.
Mm-hmm. That was right about the time that Dan Reed claims that he became interested in making this documentary.
Yeah, that is it. I mean, alarm bells go off everywhere because according to Dan Reed, he hired a researcher who was doing research and saw on the bottom of a forum someone talking about their lawsuit. And this would have been around 2016, and then he reached out to them. So it's very likely that there was a targeted campaign by someone who has a vested interest in James and Wade winning to create as much media attention to say he was guilty as they can while they're still on appeal.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people believe that this is just a litigation strategy.
Oh yeah. I mean, any filmmaker, or okay, not filmmaker, any journalist with integrity would at least take pause and include the lawsuit in the film, or maybe wait until after the lawsuit to make the film. It seems like it's all engines go to get this out as soon as possible and to make a huge splash. I don't want to believe that there is a huge conspiracy to ruin Michael Jackson for one way or another. I don't want to believe it, but I just keep finding myself thinking none of this makes sense.
No, and I'm also suspicious of how quickly this came on the heels of the R. Kelly documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that was just a coincidence because there's no way. I mean, Dan says they filmed it last year in like February or in the summer, and there's no way they were able to pull this film together in 1 month. It was less than 1 month after the R. Kelly series aired. But I wouldn't be surprised if they announced it surprise at Sundance due to the success of the R. Kelly documentary. But I don't think that it was like HBO thought we have to get our own documentary and they threw it together in a month. I doubt that's how it happened. But it's still rushed. It's still rushed between 2016 and now because 1 year of research by myself, and I still don't feel like I've scratched the surface. So there's no way that they were able to explore every possible angle and get the best product.
I believe someone pulled some strings to get that into Sundance.
Oh, had to have.
Because I believe the deadline for Sundance films, I believe that's in November. So, yeah, I think someone pulled some strings to get that shoehorned in.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And of course, the Weinstein conspiracy. There's so many angles here. I don't know if I'm 100% on board with that, but it's very suspicious that Weinstein had his own documentary happening at Sundance, and suddenly no one's talking about that, and everyone's talking about this Michael Jackson documentary. But absolutely someone pulled some strings, because I think if it's not even November, because I think in November they announce what's going to be at Sundance. It might even be earlier than November that you have to have your submission in. So absolutely someone pulled some strings.
Of course, another way you can look at that is Michael Jackson is just simply someone that a lot more people are interested in than Harvey Weinstein.
True.
But yeah, it's very suspicious.
Well, if the Michael Jackson documentary had not happened at Sundance, I think people would have been talking about the Weinstein just because everyone loves a scandal. And if they didn't have Weinstein, or if they didn't have Michael Jackson, they'd go to the next person that they could write about. But yeah, it's true. It's everything is making me second guess what's really happening here. Like, we don't know the full picture yet. I forget what brought us to the conversation, but I asked you back when we weren't recording, do you think that when Taj's documentary in a year or two or whenever comes out, that if Michael's image will be repaired, and not even repaired, but will people pay attention to it?
Well, I feel like a year might be too long, but I don't know. Maybe the dust will kind of settle around this film a little bit. Maybe the media coverage will die down a little bit. Maybe there needs to be some time for reflection, and then we get boom, then we get the rebuttal. I don't know.
Yeah.
The part of me that's just so angry about all of this, of course, I want, for me, that rebuttal can't come soon enough,
Yeah.
I want to see this rebuttal out there. I want to see these journalists apologizing, especially the ones that have been so awful. They have called him a monster and a pedophile, and have said he sexually abused them without using the word alleged. I would love to see them having to eat crow and apologize. Not that that's going to happen. That's not going to happen in the blue moon, but
they're never going to admit they were wrong.
That's my fantasy,
Yeah.
It's sort of like, did you ever see that movie, The Lost Honor of Christopher Jeffries?
No, I did not.
This is a bit off topic, but, Christopher Jeffries was an ordinary citizen in the UK in 2010. his tenant, Joanna Yates, was murdered. And of course, when the police started to investigate, they honed in on him as a suspect just because he was very eccentric, he was very weird looking, he was a retired professor, he had really long white hair like Albert Einstein, and he had this funny manner of speaking and was just a very odd character. So they framed the man, basically, and set him up, and, he was answering police interrogation questions, and he was trying to be helpful, and he thought he was helping the investigation. And the more that he voluntarily went to the police, the more that they started to suspect him, and eventually they arrested him on suspicion of the murder of Joanna Yates. And this became a big story in the UK, winter of 2010, I believe. And someone in the police department leaked his arrest to the tabloids, and the tabloids picked it up. And next thing you know, this man was in every major tabloid paper in the UK. And it was just these horrible headlines, Peeping Tom, Peeping Tom professor, and making up all of these just ludicrous stories about him. So, but, and he doesn't know any of this because he's in jail. And so by the time that they release him, he finds out that he's a celebrity in the UK, and not in a good way at all. Everybody knows his face, and he's basically being lynched in the court of public opinion because everybody thinks he murdered Joanna Yates, this beautiful young woman. And eventually, eventually they do find the killer. This was actually another tenant in the same flat where they lived, and the guy confessed. And eventually, Christopher Jeffries, he became a witness at the Levinson hearings, and every major editor of every UK tabloid had to stand up and publicly apologize to him.
Ooh.
I thought that was so great. I love that. I love that movie. As a Michael Jackson fan, I find that movie very inspiring to me.
Yeah. I mean, hoping out for hope, but fat chance that happens in America.
I would love to see that happen, with the fallout from this film.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the media is partly, if not mostly, to blame for this film and being a thing at all. We've been just bombarded with stories, one-sided or just completely false stories about Michael Jackson for decades. So people have already had it in their mind. Oh, he must have been doing something. Even if he wasn't actually doing it, he was doing something. So when they weren't, they were so obsessed with creating this weird enigma that was Michael Jackson that people, came to their own conclusions. And this film is kind of like confirming their bias, and they accept it easier.
Right. And, I've said before, the real damage from this film is coming from the media.
Mm-hmm.
And this fake outrage that they're creating, which is not really coming from the public. It's not. And if any of it is coming from the public, it's just simply because they're being bombarded with this in the media. People know about it from the media rather than from the movie. A lot of them haven't even watched the movie.
Yeah. And it's even worse when you hear or read these articles or hear these people talk about it, and no one can get even the names right. In the interview you did, I was like, did he just say Chuck Foucher? Did he just call someone Foucher? Where did that come from? And Gayle King is called Gavin. What would you say? Gavin Arvizio or something?
Grant. She called him Grant.
Grant Arvizio. And this is Gayle King, who did all the interviews with all these people supposed to know her stuff. But these are, the media is powerful, and they are influencing people, and they know they are. I tried to Google and look at the ratings for Leaving Neverland. The first three results were rating success for HBO, best documentary they've had in years, and then the third one was saying it was a flop. So, I mean, depending on which one you read, you get different information, and I think people know that. I think, especially after the 2016 election, people know how much power media has. But it's almost like in this case, they're kind of pretending not to know that, so they have an excuse to just believe it. I don't know a better way to explain that.
Yeah, that was definitely media spin, because if you actually look at the numbers, I mean, in the U.S., the second night, it didn't even crack 1 million.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they had the same numbers in all the different articles. But, one would say, oh, 1 million for the first night is great. And just, and one of them, I think, added them together and averaged it out. And they're like, that's an average of a million per episode. Like, you can't just do that. That's cheating. Your ratings went down the second day. Just accept the loss and go.
No, that's because, I mean, The Walking Dead, which is like one of the biggest staples of Sunday night, I mean, at its peak, The Walking Dead on AMC would generate 17 million.
Oh, yeah. Mm. And I think, so, I mean, they were saying the correct numbers, but basically saying that one was saying it was great numbers, and the other saying, oh, they're horrible numbers. And unless you didn't know what were good numbers or bad numbers, you would just take what they were saying at face value. The one saying it was good numbers was Deadline. I don't know if Deadline has any affiliation with HBO or AT&T. Or
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure they do. Okay, so. With that said, let's get into Leaving Neverland, point by point, whatever you want to talk about. I actually had a stronger reaction the second time I watched it than the first time, because I think I was paying a little bit more attention, but I still found it very boring and drawn out, and I wanted to take breaks several times in between just so I could do something else with my brain.
Count the drone shots.
Oh, God. Yeah, and the whimsical music. Mostly I was just waiting for the next photo of Michael to be like, oh, I haven't seen that one before.
You know, that was one of the few somewhat interesting things about it. There were a lot of rare photographs, which I imagine were personal photos. Mm-hmm. The safe chucks and the Robs. And that was kind of nice, but,
The only good thing to come out of this is we now have a video recording where Michael is putting on an Australian accent. That's it. Pack it up. Let's go home.
But anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No. Basically, the second time I was able, because I had actually seen a body language expert go through, and she believes that they're telling the truth. I don't. But the second time I tried to kind of do it like you did, where I'm like, let's pretend that I don't know everything. Would I believe this? And I mean, Safechuck comes across very genuine until you know that most of what he's saying comes from Victor Gutierrez's book. So unless you knew that, you would I would 100% believe him.
Well, there's parts of it where I believe James is probably being truthful. I would say in the first 30 minutes or so of the film. But then there's parts of it where I'm like, look at his face. I was like, and the one that really gets me is when he's showing the rings.
Yeah.
It just something about that whole scene just looks so fake to me. I can't put my.
Well, and it's been pointed out that it was filmed up in pickups. It was filmed a different day, so it wasn't a continuous shot. But it's also super manipulative with the close up on the ring and his hand shaking, and the long drawn out pauses. But most people who watch that are like, why do you still have the ring? It's one of those things where what they're saying on screen does not compute with anything else. But yeah, that is one of the more bad moments.
Yeah, and I mean, why would you keep them? You know, he says, I can't stand to look at them. Well, why are you keeping them? Secondly, how do we know Michael Jackson gave him those rings? Like I think it was Razor Fist that said, you know, how do we know those didn't come out of a gumball machine?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's holding a ring. Okay, you got a ring. We can't confirm that it came from Michael. And if it did come from Michael, how can you prove that it was for a sex act, that it was like a payment? There's no way to prove that. And we're supposed to just take that at face value?
Yeah, because well, first of all, like you said, we don't know that Michael gave him those rings.
Yeah.
And we definitely don't know that Michael gave him those rings for sexual favors, because it could have just been gifts, you know.
But I do. Oh, I'm sorry. Continue.
And where are the wedding vows?
I mean, yeah, you would think they would hold on to that because they held on to everything else. I mean, I know there's a lot of room for doubt left from what they've shown in the film. You know, oh, he lost the vows, or, you know, oh, who would give you a receipt for a sex bribe, you know. But these are valid questions that the fans are having, and we're just being completely discarded. But yeah.
But you know, I had some problems with it as a child myself who was sexually abused, and I've been very open about this through the years. You know, my own father sexually molested me. I was sexually molested from the age of 9 to the age of 14 by my own dad. Yes. So, you know, it's just like I was listening to this other debate where the guy kept saying, you know, I don't know how I would react if I was being sexually abused by someone I looked up to, you know, like Michael Jackson. Well, I can sort of comment on that because, you know, your own father is going to be someone you look up to.
Yeah.
That's, you know, your parent is your authority figure in your life. And I was 9 years old when my father started doing the things that he was doing. And so, you know, coming at it from that perspective, and I have to say, I understand that every victim's experience is going to be different. You know, I know that's the first thing people will come at me and say, well, every victim's experience is different, you know, but their stories just sounded completely off to me as far as how a child would react to that sort of thing. I mean, like Wade saying he looked forward to the sexual experiences with Michael, and he's talking about himself at 7 years old. And James saying, oh, I was sad when I woke up and I realized he was in the next room. I'm like,
and he was like 14 or 15 when that was supposed to be happening.
Yeah, but a child, you're not going to enjoy that. You're going to know. A child knows that this is not normal.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's any other, you know, studies about a child having like looking forward to it, you know, for lack of a better term, or falling in love, because this, like you said in your message, there is a NAMBLA agenda here to normalize this relationship between a grown man and a boy, to make it seem nice and romantic and like a regular relationship. And I don't know if that's supported by any other research at all besides Victor Gutierrez's book.
I don't know. I mean, it's not something I go around reading about, you know. But
me neither. I'm not an expert on this, and I think that a lot of what the film claims can fall under that umbrella of abuse affects everyone differently. You weren't there. You know, there's plausible deniability, and I do think that Wade and James are telling the truth most of the time, except for the sexual stuff. I think everything else they're saying is absolutely true besides the sexual content.
I was looking through my notes here. I'm sorry.
We've already covered the first 3 points on mine. But James was more believable to me, but Wade was not. Wade comes across like he has been practicing this speech in the mirror for the last 5 years. Like he just doesn't have any emotion, and it comes across so like he's trying to be super dramatic, and it just didn't sit right with me.
No, when they do their interviews on television, you can tell that James is looking to him for cues.
Oh yeah, he's definitely like Wade is the alpha in that when they're together. As James is always looking to him for either reassurance or cues or hey, like for backup.
I know what I was about to say. I was looking through my notes there, but yeah, it almost seems to me like the way that they were telling these stories, it almost sounds like, if Michael had just kept either me, or either James as the number one boy in his life, then the sex didn't seem to be a problem for them. That's the part I found disturbing, because neither one of them claimed to really have an issue with it until they thought they were being replaced.
Yeah, I got
by
that
other
feeling.
boys.
I got that feeling the first time I watched, and the second time I watched. I got this overwhelming sense of they were more upset at the fact that Michael stopped hanging out with them or being with them, calling them, than they were about anything else. I forget which article it was. There was an article that basically said, this is a breakup story. This isn't a story about abuse. This is a breakup story. And that's kind of what it feels like. They're angry that Michael left them.
That comes through very strong. That comes through 100%.
And I was watching this interview with on Joe Rogan's podcast with Dr. Phil, and they were talking about people who have been falsely accused. And Dr. Phil says that there's some research that suggests that people who make false allegations or false, police reports, they think they're absolutely justified in creating those false allegations because they feel wronged in some way, or they feel like they are owed something. And I can absolutely see how Wade and James can feel like they were wronged or they were owed something by either Michael not talking to them anymore, or even just by Michael dying.
Mm-hmm.
Wade said, time to get what's mine.
Yeah, it's just, there were parts of that film that I just sat back and I went, whoa, I cannot believe this just came out of your mouth. Like Wade's grandmother, who seems like generally kind of a lovely old lady, but Michael Jackson is to blame for everything.
Yeah, I tweeted something like, didn't you guys know, according to Wade's grandma, Michael is responsible for the recession, global warming, and creating ISIS. Like, they find it so convenient to blame Michael for everything that went wrong in their lives. And that's just not a healthy way to live.
I'm like, did Michael Jackson tell you guys to pack up everything and leave your dad behind and come to the United States? And, did he really promise you that all of this was going to happen if you came, or did you take it upon yourselves to do that?
Yeah. I actually was looking for that the second time I watched, and it was left very ambiguous if it was Michael's idea or Joy's idea to move back to or move to California. But it might be in her deposition. I can't remember it off the top of my head whose idea it really was. But they left it ambiguous, which to me says it was Joy. Joy basically decided she was going to move to LA, and Michael's like, sure, I'll help you.
I believe it was in 1990. They came to America for a visit. And Michael invited them to Neverland and was very hospitable to them. And then it was shortly after that Joey got this idea that she was just going to pull up stakes and, move them to the United States and look up Michael. And, it's...
Well, she's a self-admitted stage mom. And I mean, I grew up in LA. I actually grew up in Malibu of all places. So this entire film was kind of nostalgic for me in a way. But I know the allure of thinking I'm going to make it big in Hollywood. And so I do not doubt for a second that she wanted to chase that and start a new life, living it up and being Michael Jackson's friend in LA. And she probably decided she was going to do that on her own. But she is a self-admitted stage mom who did choose to leave everything behind. I think she even said she was writing a book about it, about her decision to leave. I wonder what happened with that manuscript.
Who knows? Well, she may try to cash in. If she has it, she may try to cash in with it now.
Well, that might actually, now that I'm thinking about that, that might actually be what she's referring to in the emails when Wade's like, do you know when we first went to California? And she's like, I have several versions for you. So that might be what she's talking about. But I also was thinking, so after they had the visit in early 1990 and then they moved back to Australia, I forget how long it was, maybe a year or two, where they were still in Australia before they decided to move out there permanently, where they had the fax machine. And I just keep thinking, so they never had any intention of moving back to California when they left. So Michael kept in touch with them for years, supposedly grooming Wade, a small boy that he didn't know if he was ever going to see again or be in California again. So he basically groomed a boy without any guarantee of payoff at the end. That sounds horrible, but like that's what they're trying to say.
No, that thread runs so strong throughout the film, that just that sense of entitlement.
Yeah, I actually have that in giant. I have that in giant bold letters on my paper. They are so entitled.
It's. I mean, there's a part of the film where you're kind of like, oh yeah, I understand. I would, I'd be giddy in that position too, if that happened to me. And then there's a part of it where you kind of realize, no, there's a line that's being blurred here. That somewhere along the line, they stopped recognizing where that line was.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Michael, whether he meant to or not, had an effect on people that made them feel special and made them feel like they were the only one in the room. I've even heard people say that he would make people feel like that when he was performing on stage, that he was just performing to one person in the crowd. So I'm not surprised if they were so wrapped up in that feeling of he likes us, he's chosen us. But it needs to be said that happened with everyone. That wasn't just the Robsons and the Safechucks who felt that way. It was just the Robsons and the Safechucks who seemed to feel like once that stopped, they were entitled for it to continue. They didn't accept the rejection very well.
No, it's like Brandy Jackson in her interview was saying that after Michael died, that Joy was even trying to get custody of Michael's children.
Lord. I was mad about that for 3 days. I have no reason to be mad about it, but I was so upset. Like, how dare she? What kind of woman would do that? Like, this is the type of people that we're dealing with here. Like, these are not people who were suddenly duped into being groomed and deserve sympathy. They literally thought they probably had not spoken to Michael in several years, and yet she still thought she could call up and say, I should take the children. Just who does that?
They were still building themselves up as more than what they were to Michael.
Yes.
Chantel wasn't Chantel. Okay.
I want to say Chantal, but you
Chantel.
Okay.
But she was saying, after Michael died, they were contacted to go to the memorial. According to Todd Jackson, no, they weren't. Todd said that Wade called him, asking to be invited to the memorial. That was a tweet that Taj put out in 2016 that Wade called him begging. And then I guess he pulled some strings and got Wade invited. And then next thing you know, Wade's sending him an email, need an SUV for the whole family.
I actually don't think that's completely true. I think Taj did reach out to them, and he was like, "Hey, I don't know if anyone thought of you guys," and that's how that happened. But Taj also says that they had already asked someone, and they said they would get back to them and never got back to them. So they had reached out first to go, but I think Taj did reach out to them, and they didn't call him saying we demand to be at that memorial, but Taj did upload the screenshots basically saying, look at how much they asked for. They all wanted to be there. They were so grateful. And then look what they've done now. But I think in the text message it does say, hey, Wade, I was just wondering if anyone reached out to you or not. I think it does say that.
Yeah, but that memorial, that was a big chance for celebrities to be seen.
Oh yeah.
That was a huge platform for celebrities because that was a global event.
Yeah.
And it's just like Bill Whitfield said, people were there that hadn't seen Michael in years because everybody wanted to be seen at that memorial.
Yeah. No, I have no doubt in my mind that the Robsons have exaggerated their actual relationship with Michael. I got the impression that Safe Chuck was really more like a best friend. When he went on tours and hung out with him, and the way that they were interacting in a lot of these videos, it was like two best friends. But then you don't see Wade going on tour with them. You don't see videos of Wade and Michael acting like best friends. You see Michael looking at Wade like, look at that adorable little boy over there who's like so young. He doesn't even know what's going on around him. So I definitely got the impression that Wade was seen as like this cute little kid, hence little one, and James was seen as, hey, this is my best friend, someone that I can hang out with and have fun, which further illustrates the fact that these boys are describing different events, and yet people keep saying they're so similar. I'm like, no, they're really not. They're describing two totally different predators, and they had two totally different relationships with him.
Although with that said, one thing that kind of struck me, I was saying before that, kind of being a sexual victim myself as a child, that something just feels off to me about the way they're portraying these two stories. And one thing that struck me kind of odd would be, first of all, I just don't think a child internalizes sexual abuse the way that they're describing here. That it's this perfectly normal thing and it's this perfectly loving thing. That certainly was not my experience. I was a small child, but I knew in the back of my mind, it was like, I was like, this is my father, and I was like, this is effed up. I remember even as a kid having those kinds of thoughts, and the way I would get through it would just be to mentally project myself out of my body and kind of pretend that it wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Like I remember sometimes when the abuse would take place, like, I would be listening to my phonograph records. And sometimes he would always wait till my mother was out of the house, he'd wait till she went to go get her hair done or something. And he would come into my room, sit down on my bed, and start fondling me. And I always remember as a kid, I never exactly fought him off because he was my dad, but I would just kind of sit there and pretend it wasn't happening. It was really odd. Like I remember like the record spinning on the little turntable, and I would focus on that, and I'd be like, okay, when he's done, I can get back to listening to my records.
Yeah.
And I remember having those kinds of feelings. I don't remember ever feeling like, oh, this feels so good. I wish he would come into the room and and be with me some more.
And feeling jealous that it's happening with someone else. I think jealousy would probably be the last thing someone would think if the abuse had stopped on you and started on someone else. There are a bunch of other feelings which would probably happen first.
Yeah, and besides that, even if let's say, okay, maybe that was the experience for one of them, I don't buy that it would be the experience for both of them.
Yeah.
One of them would feel very traumatized. At least one of them, I think, would have been so traumatized they wouldn't have been able to keep that from their parents and everybody else and just go on acting normal, la-di-da, like nothing's going on. I just don't buy that for a minute.
And they also don't express any guilt about that. They talk about guilt when it comes to Gavin Arvizo and Jordan Chandler, but they don't talk about guilt that they could have stopped these other boys, which they clearly insinuate were abused from being abused. They don't talk about any sort of guilt with that. But this feeling that they have of being replaced by a new boy, I would completely expect from a non-sexual friendship of boys who were best friends with Michael Jackson, and that was probably the coolest thing about their life, and suddenly that's not going to be a thing anymore, and feeling so jealous and hurt about the new boy. I mean, I remember being a kid on the playground and feeling jealous that my best friend had a new friend. That's a very normal reaction to that.
And that's a normal childhood reaction.
So I think they're telling the truth about that. I think they're telling the truth about feeling jealous about a new boy. I just don't think that had anything to do with it.
Wade was jealous of Macaulay Culkin. When he realized, he said Macaulay was, quote, the new best friend or the new boy, quote, unquote.
Yeah.
And his mother. Now, this is what shocked me. Because I knew that part was in there where she was griping about, the dumpy apartment and having to have the rental car to take them to the video shoot. I knew that was in there. I didn't understand the context until I had actually watched the film all the way through. She's angry and upset because she's thinking Wade has been replaced with a new boy, and that's why Michael is not giving us all these nice things and doing all these nice things for us like he did before.
I mean, that might be another reason that everyone's like, these mothers basically pimped their children out to Michael Jackson. I've never liked that because but when you compare the similarities between Joy and Stephanie, they're both kind of stage mothers. They both got really nice things from Michael, and they both kind of got angry when it stopped. Stephanie, when she got the phone call from Michael when he got married, she said, "We've been dumped." And Joy was, angry that Michael wasn't calling Wade anymore, and Michael didn't invite Wade onto his tour. They have more similarities than the stories that the boys are telling of their abuse.
Oh, right. And again, and that was another one of my reeling moments there when Stephanie Safechuck says, "We got dumped." I mean, what kind of reaction is that when, your friend has just called you and told you that he's gotten married? Don't you say congratulations or, not, oh, we got dumped.
I mean, that's an entitled reaction. But now that I'm thinking about it, that sounds extremely out of character, in my opinion, of Michael to call someone up basically to say, you won't be seeing much of me. I think I've heard more stories of him just stopping contact to avoid a confrontation than to straight up call someone.
So you think maybe the call didn't happen at all?
I mean, the call probably happened, but he probably did not say point blank, I'm not going to be seeing you much anymore. She took it that way because she felt rejection just like her son did. Because she was just as close with Michael. She would talk on the phone with Michael for several hours, just like James. But I don't know if I would say the phone call never happened. I don't want to say that they're flat out creating that. But it doesn't align up with what I've heard of how Michael deals with hurting people's feelings. normally he avoids it as much as he can.
Yeah, Michael didn't like conflict.
No.
He would try to avoid it whenever possible. Anything that was unpleasant to deal with, he would usually just try to avoid it.
That reminds me. So I was rereading Rabbi Shmuley's book, The Michael Jackson Tapes, and there's a lot of quotes in there that are now popping out at me after this film. So Michael says, completely unprompted, he would audition boys for his commercials or for his music videos without him there. He would send a film crew out to film them, and then he would review the auditions. And as far as I know, he did this with everyone, not just kids, but he was talking about kids in the book. And he said he did that because he did not want to have to turn them down to their face. He did not want to hurt their feelings by saying, you're not good enough, or I'm picking this one over you. He was really connected with that feeling that children have when they feel rejected, and he was trying to avoid that. So in the film, they talk about how apparently Michael sent people out to record James in his house while Michael is in Australia on the dad tour, I believe. And you even see a Christmas tree in the living room while James is dancing around. I'm really curious if that videotape of James dancing actually was the audition for the Pepsi commercial and not some random video that Michael had them send out and take at his house. Because it's been said that he would audition kids, and the Pepsi commercial was filmed in December, which means that maybe audition happened around November, where there would maybe be a Christmas tree. I don't know anyone who puts up a Christmas tree in October, but I can't remember what James says in the beginning of that video about I would be thrilled. Wow, yeah, like he's really acting it up, But I'm curious if they were trying to say that video came afterwards when actually it was the audition for the Pepsi commercial.
I think they were. I mean, my understanding was that they were saying it came after.
That's what they're saying, but I'm being curious if maybe that's not completely true. Another idea that I had is that so. Michael was all about creating the magic and his image and everything. So I'm almost curious if Michael took James on tour with him to kind of make that Pepsi commercial come to life, if that makes any sense. Like he wanted people to be like, wow, he's actually with the Pepsi commercial kid.
I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think he thought this would be a great marketing campaign to take into real life, and it had really nothing to do with James at all. It just had to do with I'll actually become friends with the kid from the Pepsi commercial, and people will think it could be real.
Yeah, and I think there was this whole sort of kid power, which that's not a phrase I originated. I came across that phrase in an article by Reverend Barbara Kaufman, whom I respect a lot. But she talked about this kid power image that Michael was cultivating, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that he, as a PR stunt, I think that he was kind of courting that image as sort of like this Peter Pan Pied Piper figure, with the children follow me everywhere I go, and I create this magic for the children. And I think he was sort of going for that image. And that at the same time, that was the reason he was downplaying his adult relationships and, any relationships he had with women and so forth. He just didn't want to come across that way.
Oh, yeah.
He was wanting to court that image of being this sort of Peter Pan figure who... I think it ties in with this idea that, children have the power, children can change the world, and this idea of empowering children.
And that was a big thing in the 90s. I mean, I don't know about the 80s. I wasn't there in the 80s, but I remember the 90s all being about kids shows and kids entertainment and kids, being empowered.
I think that's a big part of what he was doing, it backfired on him, unfortunately.
Yeah.
With the Chandler allegations. Once the Chandler allegations hit, it just, he couldn't do that anymore, and he still wanted to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the great tragedy of Michael Jackson in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Tragedy. I love that word. I do actually think that that's a more apt word for, the career of Michael Jackson, is that it's just tragic that everything he tried to do ended up turning on him and blowing up in his, not even blowing up in his face, being used against him, really. Because if he was trying to create this image, and he really tried, like, he knew how to work his brand. He absolutely knew that. But for his brand that he worked so hard on to be the very thing that has now tainted and perhaps ruined his legacy is tragic to me.
Yeah, because I don't think you could get any more sincere than he was. I mean, he really believed in this.
I don't think anyone can be perfect, but I think Michael Jackson tried really hard to be. That's the only way I can say it. I don't think he was flawless. I think he had his issues, but I think he strived to be a good person.
I think he had an ideal of himself that he was trying very hard to live up to.
Maybe. I'll have to think on that phrase a little bit more. But he definitely had, like, he was a master when it came to his career and his image. But he was not perfect, but he tried really hard to be. That's the only way I can try to explain to other people that he could not have done these things, even if he was sleeping in bed with children and hanging out with them all the time, is because he genuinely believed, or he wanted to be kind to everybody.
Yeah, his kindness was used against him. Time and time again.
So I wasn't sexually abused as a child, but I was very severely emotionally and physically abused. And up until maybe 24, when I had a rude waking up call, I was always hyper aware of other people's feelings. I had people call me, an empath, where I really could not hurt people's feelings. I relate a lot to what I've read about Michael that way. It's that I genuinely think that he wanted to fix all the children and make sure that they never felt the way that he did when he was growing up, and he went way overboard with it, and it came to bite him, basically. But no one else could really understand that, because quote unquote normal people don't go out of their way to make sure that people don't feel bad like that.
Yeah, and he was also making sure that other children in entertainment had a childhood, and that they weren't exploited the way he had been.
Absolutely.
That was why he was reaching out to people like Corey Feldman and Macaulay Culkin. And it was why, he reached out to people like Elizabeth Taylor and Shirley Temple, who were already adults, but they had been there. They had experienced what it was like to be a child star. He reached out to any of the Argane cast members that were still alive. George Spanky McFarlane was a good friend of his. He reached out to all those people that he knew had been through childhood stardom. The ones that had been there and were adults and scarred adults as a result of that, and the ones who were still going through it, the ones who were still children and going through this. He was reaching out to all of them. With the adults, I think he could commiserate, and I think with the children, he was trying to give them some sense of normalcy.
Yes. I've always had that idea in my mind, but when I read Joy's deposition, where she says that Michael called her and said, "Please don't work Wade so hard," it just confirmed everything that I had just been thinking, is that he he was very aware of how his childhood affected him, and he didn't want it to affect anybody else. So when you look at his friends that he, well, besides Brett Barnes, I don't know how he met Brett, but Wade had a stage mom, James had a stage mom, and they were working in Hollywood. Corey Feldman was a child star. Macaulay Culkin was about to explode. He took in child stars, especially boys, because that's what he understood, who were in the industry, and almost was like the mentor that he never had, or that he wished he wanted, to say, slow down a little bit. We're just going to be kids right now. We're not going to work you know 4 days a week and nonstop. So once you actually remember Joy and Stephanie were stage moms, then the boys that Michael hung out with all had one thing in common. They were working in Hollywood. Besides Brett, I don't know where he met Brett. I really know nothing about Brett.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there are a couple of exceptions. Jordan, of course, he wasn't in show business, but his dad was an aspiring screenwriter. Well, Jordan wasn't in the business. Gavin wasn't in the business.
No, but Gavin, I love your post about, is Gavin Arviza the only kid Michael ever hated? I read that a few weeks ago, and my mind exploded because it was like all these things were in my face, but I did not notice them until you pointed them out. Oh my God. I love that blog post. Everyone needs to go read it right now. Because all the signs are there that Michael just put up with Gavin because he was a charity case.
Well, Gavin was a kid that he was fond of at first, you know.
Yeah.
But the Arvizos just, again, it was this sense of entitlement. And after Gavin got well, he actually became something of a brat, you know. And I think he just, Michael got to a point, is like, I really just don't want to be around this kid anymore, you know. And it's one of the few times where he felt that way about the kid as much as he did about the mom or the parents, you know.
Yeah. Because
even
it makes. Go ahead.
Even Jordan, he still had no resentment, I don't think, towards Jordan. He even told Stephanie Safechuck that, at least according to what she said in the film, he said he didn't hate Jordan. He said it was his father that he knew was behind this, and he had the problem with the father, but not with Jordan.
Yeah. Michael had these children that he thought he was saving, because I get the impression that he he believed in the spiritual, but more than just, Jehovah's Witness and God. He also believed in like energies. So I think he thought that loving these children and helping these children and easing their stress probably would actually help them heal. But he had these children who were sick and dying that he, like Todd said, I'm not letting this kid die on my watch. So, Gavin, I don't know if Dave falls in there, but Dave was definitely more of a charity case than a best friend. There's those children, and then there's Safechuck, who appears to me like a best friend. They actually get along and play around. And then there's Wade, which is, this is a kid that I could probably help, who's trying to get into the industry. So even when you like Michael compartmentalizes his life, when you compartmentalize these kids. I don't. So you're right about Jordan. Jordan wasn't working in the industry. I always kind of felt like Michael thought that June and Jordan and his sister, I can't remember her name, were kind of like going to be his family. He wanted a wife and children, and he kind of acted like June and the kids were that. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's the feeling I get, is that they were like a little family.
Michael just, he tended to adopt families.
Yeah, that's true.
He did that with the Cassios, and obviously with the Robsons, the Safechucks, with Jordan Chandler's family. But it really just seemed like he was looking for a family.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just feel like with the Chandlers, with June in particular, it was a little. I mean, I don't know if I ever saw June and the kids out with Michael and her husband at the time. I feel like it was always just June. So whereas, you know, the Cassios, he would hang out with the entire family, husband included, or father included. I just didn't get that feeling with Chandler. I felt like the Chandlers was a different thing. Like he actually was playing father instead of playing brother.
Mm-hmm. I tend to believe that too.
Okay. But he befriended entire families. He stayed at people's houses. I think that's another huge issue people are having with his behavior is that he would go and stay at their house for multiple days and probably, I mean, most of the time sleep in the kids' room. But when you think about how famous Michael was and how he also wanted to just be normal, it doesn't seem so nefarious.
Mm-hmm. There was obviously some, I think some sort of void there he was looking to fill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's another thing I wrote down in my notes when I was watching the movie is that Michael Jackson can't help the fact that he's Michael Jackson. They were basically using the fact that he was a superstar, beloved by everybody, and had lots of power and money as if he did that all intentionally just to groom these families. But he's been a superstar since he was like 9.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what was that he said in the Oprah interview? He was like, Michael Jackson was grooming us just by being Michael Jackson.
Yeah, something about he was grooming us for years before we ever met him. Was I think what he said. Oh my God! And that sounds like something that came from his book, which no one wants to publish. All I could say was Michael can't help the fact that he's Michael Jackson. They're using that against him.
Mm-hmm. That was the height of ridiculousness.
Yeah. I mean, and that's presumably why the Simpsons episode was pulled, was because I guess he was grooming all the children in the world through the TV screen by making himself seem more relatable. I didn't understand that. All I know is that David Geffen probably pulled some strings. But the fact that he, like, they were and this is something that Peter Tilden talked with you about, the fact that he was beloved by kings and queens and princes and princesses and the Pope and the president. All these people gave their stamp of approval on Michael Jackson and loved him, and the whole entire world loved him and the entire film, they use this example over and over and over again. Like, how could we go against this person who's universally beloved? But Michael can't help the fact that he's that famous. Yes, he probably at some point in his life wanted to expand his fame, but also most of his life he hated the fact that he was that famous. And his father, started the Jackson 5. I'm not going to talk bad on Joe, but Michael didn't have a choice. At that age, Michael did not have a choice about going into that career. You can say when you're 9 years old, oh, I want to be an astronaut one day, but that doesn't mean that your parents should immediately put you into NASA, because you might change your mind. So Michael didn't have a choice to be the superstar or be as talented as he was. He could have chosen later to, I guess, stop his career entirely. But I really hated the fact that they kept using that as evidence of his grooming, in particular to these two families.
Well, they tended to, as we've already established, the film's very manipulative. They take a lot of things out of context.
Yeah.
And of course, a big one that people have been talking about recently is the press statements that Mark Garagos was making.
Garagos, yes.
Garagos,
Yeah, I saw that. I opened up my Twitter this morning and saw that, and if it had not been pointed out to me, I would not have known that Garagos wasn't talking about the victims.
The way that they edited that, it made it look like he was talking about any accusers.
Yeah.
That would come forth.
But he was really talking about the people who secretly recorded Michael and his attorneys on their plane. It's like two totally separate, but it was added into the film to make you believe he's talking about the victims. Very manipulative. I don't know if that's going to be removed from future broadcasts now that people have pointed that out, and Garagos is probably threatened to sue. But I felt like most of the manipulation happened in part 2 versus part 1, especially explaining why Wade and James defended Michael for so long. That's what I felt like part 2 really was. It was just trying to explain why they defended him. But most of the flat out lies from the family are in part 2 when it comes to the dinner that they had after Wade testified, Wade saying that he was subpoenaed, but Scott Ross says that he definitely was not. But I noticed that a lot of the footage of Michael getting out of the car and walking to the courthouse is overlapped with unrelated footage of fans screaming. I've watched a lot of Michael Jackson videos, so I know that when Michael actually got out of the car at the Santa Barbara courthouse, it wasn't shrill, shrieking, chaotic fans screaming when he did that. Like, you hear a few fans chanting, you hear a little screaming, but it's ridiculous the way that they have it done in the movie to further cement this idea that Michael was a superstar and everyone loved him. I know for a fact they put in screaming on top of footage which had no screaming. Because I've seen the original film. I thought that was the most blatant silent manipulation in part 2.
And also every time one of these men, one of these grown men,
yes,
James, starts to talk about their story of abuse, they cut away to a childhood picture. Every single time they talked about the abuse, and all of a sudden we're looking at little Wade, or we're looking at James, and of course we're supposed to be connecting with the child. Never mind that the grown man is telling his story. We get to remind us that this is how old they were when this was happening. So there's a lot of that kind of emotional manipulation as well.
Absolutely. And Dan has taken it onto the press tour with him. Whenever he talks about Wade or James in an interview, he always calls them boys. And I remember once he called them young men. They're in their late 30s, early 40s now. Like, I don't know if they're okay being called these boys constantly on TV. But it's definitely a tactic that Dan is using to make you envision these small little boys who were abused by Michael Jackson. When in fact, so James talks about crying by himself and crying out for his mother and feeling rejected. And I think he's supposed to be about 15 at that age. But they of course don't mention his age ever. Maybe they do, but like way in the beginning. But you're right that when they show you photos, it's always these little babies or young. But by the time Wade testified in 2005, he was 22. And in my opinion, hamming it up for the cameras, because just like the memorial in 2009, being a part of Michael Jackson's trial was like you want to be seen there in Wade's Twisted Little Mind, in my opinion. He will forever be connected to Michael Jackson by being at that trial. And according to Scott Ross, he didn't hesitate at all to say, yes, I'll go and testify. Probably because he wanted to be there.
I think so.
He definitely looks like he, like you can even see in one of the shots, he notices a camera in front of him and he like adjusts himself a little bit to look better for the camera, which isn't bad in and of itself, but thinking of who Wade is as a person, I would not put it past him to think that it was something to make him relevant or to help his career to be at that trial. That just might be me being cynical, but.
And something else I was noticing as I was watching yesterday, anything that would sort of cast shade on Wade's character, they're very careful to leave out. For example, they don't talk about him having an affair with Britney Spears. They don't talk about that he broke Britney Spears up with Justin Timberlake. I mean, all of that is just, and maybe in all fairness, they didn't feel it was relevant, but I'm just kind of like, why would you just gloss over all of this?
True. They try really hard to make these people look way better than they are. It's besides the mothers. They really don't hold any punches with the mothers. So Wade cheating on Brandy with Britney, or really betraying Justin Timberlake by sleeping with his girlfriend, if we're regular people. That not being included is understandable. Oh, it's not relevant. We don't want him to look bad. But as soon as the fans mention that, to be like, look at the kind of person this guy is, then I'm sure Dan would say that's a symptom of abuse. That's a symptom of him being sexually abused. He acts out like that. But if you say, okay, it's a symptom of being abused, then you should have included it in the film. You can't have it both ways. You can't ignore it and say that it's not relevant, and then as soon as it's brought up, have an excuse that makes it relevant again. It's running in circles with these people, I swear.
They'll come back and say, well, what difference does it make? Wade cheated on this person or that person, that's irrelevant. We're not judging his character. We're trying to tell his story as a victim. But they're doing the same thing to Michael throughout the entire 4 hours. It's a 4-hour character assassination.
Yeah. They're very picky and choosy about, why would we interview the family? They weren't there. But then they're interviewing like Wade's grandmother, who wasn't there either. The wives who weren't even in the picture when this happened. But I mean, they can make a justification for that. But everything else, no, it wouldn't have been allowed. It's infuriating how one-sided and clearly biased in the agenda they were trying to pursue, while also sitting there and trying to tell us, no, this is factual and well researched, and we're just like, no, there's no way it is. If you want to be one-sided, fine, be one-sided and say that. But they've chosen to silence the other side.
And I've heard the argument too, and I think Peter Tilden brought this up as well, that oftentimes documentaries are one-sided. By their very nature, they're usually trying to present some sort of agenda. The filmmaker has a position. And their documentary is usually a kind of argumentation of their position. And I do get that, but I think when we're dealing with a human being, an actual entertainer who is deceased, who still has family, who still has children that can be affected by this, I don't think you can just run with these kinds of allegations. I mean, we're talking about a very, very serious crime here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not just simply trying to prove that he was a less than stellar person or something like that. I mean, this is a crime.
Yeah.
He's being accused of that he cannot defend himself against.
Exactly.
And I think in that situation, absolutely, I think the filmmaker has a responsibility to present a balanced narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that he would at least do a little bit more homework before trying to present this as if the final word on Michael Jackson. Isn't that what he said? He said this was going to be the final word on Michael Jackson's legacy.
I heard he was talking about doing a sequel.
Well, of course he's going to do a sequel. We've done all the work for him, and he's going to say, "Oh, this is just what I didn't include in the first one." Now, I really think that the sequel is his. If he does a sequel, which I pray to God he doesn't, it will just be him fixing all the mistakes the mistakes he did in this first one, and be like, "Look how good I am! I did this one." No, you've had your one chance. Stay with that. You fucked that up. But I mean, he's saying this is going to be the final word on Michael Jackson, while also simultaneously saying in an interview, I don't think that we should stop playing his music or something like that. So he really cannot make up his mind one day to the next about what his goal for this film really was.
No, but you know, he can't be that naive. He can't go into this having made this thing and put it out there and not knowing what the fallout reaction is going to be.
I think he knew. I think he's just trying to pretend to be nice when he's saying we shouldn't mute him. He's lying through his teeth, but he's trying to sound nice. But then, other days when he's not in such a great mood, he's not nice at all, and he's showing his agenda quite clearly. I like to say that Michael Jackson is Dan Reed's white whale. Hopefully he's going to die on this mission. But he thought Michael Jackson was the biggest, most notorious pedophile there ever was, and he was going to take him down. And so far, us fans really have to give ourselves some credit, because I think the small blip that Leaving Neverland is due in part to the fans being as vocal as they have been.
And I also think that what the fans have done is a big part of why we're seeing a lot of reassessment now of the film. Because and a lot of these journalists who initially had these knee-jerk reactions, some of them now are going back and they're doing further research, and they're seeing what's being put out there, largely from the fans, because the mainstream media is not doing this.
No.
So that's where it's coming from, and I think that it is making people reassess, and reflect further on their initial reactions to this film.
I haven't seen a lot. I don't know if you've just seen more than I have, but I haven't seen a lot of people reassessing. I've seen some. I hope that this is something that we'll see much more of. I'm just pessimistic, but all I've been seeing lately is more and more people actually muting Michael Jackson. Taking his products off the shelves and stop playing his music, and full-hearted diving into the Kool-Aid that they've been fed.
Although I think the media is exaggerating a lot of that.
They are. I agree with that.
One story tends to feed the next story.
Yeah. I think a good example of that is the Paris Jackson story from yesterday. So Paris has intentionally stayed very quiet, and the media has been, making clickbait headlines about she finally broke her silence about the allegations or about Leaving Neverland, when she really didn't, and she would call them out on it. So I guess their retaliation to her, or maybe as a way of saying we're the ones in power here, you have no power, is to make up a story that she tried to commit suicide. That's just so blatant of basically saying, if you don't play with us, we'll target you and we'll make your life a living hell, which is exactly what they did to her father.
And they force her into a position where she almost has to make a statement.
Yeah. This is them pushing their power, basically showing how much power that they have, and forcing her to do what they want her to do. She can't be her own person when this is happening.
That's horrible.
That's horrible. I can't, like, it. Ugh. I don't think I've ever had something wake me up so hard to say that the media can force you to do whatever than what they did yesterday to Paris Jackson.
Yeah, and I was kind of mind blown by that because I had just been reading some of her tweets that I think were earlier in the day from that very day. So I was like, wait a minute. You know, one minute she's like tweeting really innocuous stuff, and next thing you know, she slit her wrists.
Yeah, it was almost like if you're not going to give us something to write about for several days, then we're going to make something up. It was ridiculous. And then of course, so she tweets immediately after the story breaks, like, you know, fuck you, you fucking liars, which, you know, same. And then they changed her story to she's at home now, she's safe. Like, they don't even say Paris Jackson just called us out on Twitter. They're just like, she's okay. All of this was nothing. Well, not even that. They were sticking with their story, but basically saying, oh, she's at home now, that's why she can tweet. I just thought that was a blatant show of power. And I have to wonder myself, you know, Michael, especially near the end of his life, was really made an enemy of the media and of the tabloids, and they probably took that war on. You know, he would say they're lying, and then they would say he's molesting children. He would say they're lying, burn all the tabloids, put them in a pile and burn them, and they'd say he's dangling his baby over a balcony. You know, it seems like he made an enemy of the media, which we now can see is so powerful. And I'm just wondering if maybe that's not a mistake that Paris should make as well. She might do it, but I don't know if she should, because I mean, look how that ended up with Michael.
Yeah, I saw one story about her just a few days ago where I don't remember if it was TMZ. It might have been TMZ, but they just caught her walking down the street, and she had her head down. And the headline said something like Paris hangs her head in shame over her father. Just some ridiculous headline. Like, now it's like they can't even run a story about her without bringing this into it.
Yeah,
and it's always from this angle that Paris is ashamed, or Paris feels shame, or Paris thinks her father is guilty. I've seen those kinds of headlines. It's never anything positive, of course not.
No. I mean, it is ridiculous that they've apparently chosen that the Jackson family is their favorite punching bag when it comes to just making their life hell. I mean, they're already at their lowest right now with this film and people harassing them, and then the media just has to pile on. There's no respect. It's very upsetting. I don't blame Paris for staying quiet, but I think the reason that they are doing this is because she isn't saying anything. But then again, they did it even worse to Blanket. They were like, he hasn't spoken in weeks because he's like so ashamed of what his father did or something. And I was like, no, you need to stop. Like, obviously this kid is really troubled, and you're just making it worse. You need to stop. If it were true.
It doesn't help when you've got the son claiming that Michael was grooming him to abuse him.
Okay, that's like S-U-N, not S-O-N. I was like, which son is saying that? Okay. The son. I think a lot of these papers, like, I don't know how, because Blanket is very much alive, and his family is very much alive. So I don't know why they can't be sued with defamation for saying that they were worried they were grooming Blanket. It's open season on Michael now. We get that. Like, you can say whatever you want, and there's nothing they can do about it. But his children are very much alive. His children will be around longer than Wade and James will be. They'll be long gone while the children still have to deal with the fallout of this. But it's the defamation that I guess I don't quite understand why they can say such say things like Paris tried to commit suicide, and if she can prove that that's not true, that's money in the bank.
Yeah, I've read quite a bit about why celebrities don't sue tabloids more than what they do. I think a lot of it is just it comes down to being more trouble than it's worth for them.
I can see that. And I can also see the argument, which I basically just made it, which is you don't want to make an enemy out of them. They'll make your life a living hell for the rest of your life. Okay, so anything else in Leaving Neverland that you want to touch on? We're coming in on 2 hours. I don't know when you want to stop.
Yeah, I will have to stop here in a little bit, or my husband's probably going to be angry at me.
Okay.
Let's see. Let me look through my notes here real quick, just to make sure I'm not leaving out something really important that I wanted to touch on.
Okay. I have it right here. One of the most outrageous things that I heard even before I saw the film was the fact that the Safe Chucks are claiming that Michael told them that school isn't important and that no one needs school and he shouldn't go to school. That was one of the first things I was like, oh, hell no, that does not sound right.
That doesn't sound like Michael.
It feels like these families have had a lot of hurt and misery in their lives, and they've found the perfect scapegoat in Michael Jackson. They can blame him for everything that went wrong, and they don't have to accept any of the responsibility for it.
The only thing I would say to that is I do think that Michael believed in the fact that one could self-educate oneself. I'll say that much, but I don't think that he was trying to encourage James to drop out of school or any of that nonsense.
I guess I could see him maybe making the case for, if you're going to be a director, you don't need to go to school for that. You can teach yourself. But the way they were setting it up was like, Michael straight up was like, you don't need it. You don't need math. Like, Even if it were,
you don't need anything but me.
They like making him dependent on him. That's actually the word they say next. It's like you have to depend on him, which is ridiculous. So even if that conversation did happen, like I said earlier, I think a lot of this is true, but they're twisting it. Even if that conversation did happen, I doubt it was the way that they're portraying it. They could be looking at everything that happened with Michael with a biased view and twisting it to make it look bad. And there's no one there to refute that.
I think at this stage of the game, anything Michael did, anything he said now is fair game for them to twist to suit their agenda however they want.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe, something he might have said that they would have taken one way, 20 years ago, now they're looking at it through a new filter. How can we use this to our advantage?
Yeah. And it's like all their quote unquote proof or evidence that they do have, like the faxes and the voicemails and the interviews. Depending on which way you're looking at it, it could be either innocent or somehow twisted and evil if you look at it through their lens. I mean, obviously they didn't think it was that big of a deal when it was happening. They thought it was innocent then. So why, I find it very hard to separate myself because I'm like, it's not true. Like, it's obviously not true. But I find it very hard to be there in the mindset of, okay, even if it was true. So that's my problem.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing that struck me as I was watching the film. I couldn't quite get my hands around how I felt about Joey Robson by the end of the film. I believe that if Wade Robson is lying, which I genuinely believe in my heart of hearts that he is. I'm sorry for anybody that feels otherwise, but if Wade is lying, that has got to be, I mean, that's a horrible thing that he's doing to his mother. If she believed him all those years, and now he's got her believing that Michael molested him, and if she genuinely believes that, and Wade is just lying about all of this, I think that that's a horrible, horrible thing that he's doing to his mother.
Yes. I'm undecided on whether or not the mothers know if it's true or not. I definitely at first was thinking, oh no, Wade is fooling everybody. He's not telling anyone that he's lying. He wants everyone to believe it's real. And yes, that's absolutely horrible thing to do to your mother. Which is why I kind of wonder, maybe she does know that he's lying, and he but Wade's also kind of a sociopath. Maybe he doesn't care. But there are some instances which make you think she knows it's just a big scam. Some facts of hers that have changed, some lies that she's willingly going along with. Now she could just be doing that to help her son's lawsuit because she's angry at this man for hurting her son, or she could just be in on it. But there are some, I can't remember off the top of my head what they are. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that dinner that everyone had at Neverland, and the entire family said it happened before he testified, when that's just not true. So what reason would Joy have to lie for them if she genuinely believes it? But yes, absolutely. And I feel like the villains in this film were set up to be the mothers, not even Michael. They end the film basically with the mother saying, "I fucked up," and they don't come across looking very well at all. And I feel like that's the main takeaway people take away from the film is, how dare those mothers are horrible. I would never be that bad of a mother. That's really what the main thing people are saying. Do you have any children?
No, I don't.
Okay, because I was wondering if maybe I couldn't feel or see something because I didn't have children of my own, because I wasn't nearly as outraged at the mothers as other people who do have children were. But yeah. I wonder if maybe it's not designed that way to make mothers kind of feel self-righteous and be like, I would never do that to my child. And then, they believe it because they want it to be true, because they don't want to be those mothers.
It's just manipulative on so many levels.
Yes.
The only thing I would say in somewhat favor of the film, and this is a very small thing I'm granting it, but I would say just as a cautionary tale about the allure of stardom and the allure of throwing away everything of value to chase what glitters. I think it is a good cautionary tale in that regard. I just don't believe any of the sexual stuff.
It definitely paints a good picture of how you can get swept up in this kind of world, especially if you desire it for yourself as well. I also am very outraged at the fact that Oprah even said it, and other people have said it. I've heard a lot of people say this, like, even if Michael didn't do this, or this isn't about Michael Jackson, let's talk about how child molestation and child sexual abuse actually happens. I think it's outrageous that they're using Michael, an innocent man, in my opinion, as a tool for an end that they have, which is just to raise awareness or discuss this. Use someone else. Use anyone else, but you cannot sacrifice Michael Jackson and his legacy and his innocence to have the biggest poster board or poster child you can to discuss this thing. Michael Jackson is not your tool to discuss child molestation.
Exactly, because we would have to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt before we can even have that conversation.
Yeah.
And we're not there.
Yeah. I got that was my main thing with Oprah, is that she opened her show by saying this isn't about Michael Jackson, but then the rest of this show she just talks about, so Michael Jackson did this to you. I feel like they probably did that because of the lawsuit that's still pending. I definitely feel like Dan Reed changed his tone in interviews after the lawsuit was filed of the non-defamation. This isn't about Michael Jackson. This isn't about Michael Jackson. Even Oprah. This isn't about Michael Jackson. But it is. It's all about Michael Jackson.
Who else is it about? That's the reason they have their platform.
Yeah. No, like. Okay, it's not about Michael Jackson. Then take every single picture of him out, take his music out, take his name out, and just have two people tell a story about them being molested by someone. They can't do that because they need Michael Jackson to, like, for everything. They need it to make their story. They need it to sell their story. They need it to get eyeballs on their story. They need Michael Jackson. So it is about Michael Jackson. They are lying to you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that was definitely one thing that I know that you touched on it, which was basically the idolation from the family towards Michael. We kind of touched on it earlier about, like I know Hollywood. I know how insecure people react when they're around stardom. I am one of them. My best friend is not. So I know how easy it is to get swept up in that. And so this would actually serve as a very good way of saying don't get swept up in that stardom. It could be a cautionary tale for that, absolutely. But they chose to go the pedophile route.
Because they actually one of the most powerful storylines in the whole documentary was what happened to Wade's father.
Yes.
When the whole family abandoned him. And then of course he committed suicide, had all those issues with mental illness, which I think that might be some of Wade's issue as well. I think that Wade has bipolar disorder as well.
But he might. He very much might. I think he has no soul. But that's just me. So Joy in that interview with the dance podcast or dance radio show that they took down and everyone keeps re-uploading.
Mm-hmm.
Joy talks, I haven't listened to the whole thing, but Joy talks about a book she was writing. And it's about her decision to leave, and she talks about all the sacrifices. She never once mentions her husband, by the way, when she's talking about this. She talks about her father a lot, and her I guess her eldest son a lot. But she never talks about her husband. She's talking about the sacrifices and the decision to come over and chase their dreams. And you get the impression that she basically decides that it was a good thing to do. So she was already writing a book on this, and it's very interesting, and it would have been a better choice. I'm curious if that book will ever see the light of day now. Maybe she can sell it after this documentary, or maybe she can't because it says it conflicts too much with the lawsuit. But I actually thought it was quite weird how she never mentioned her husband at all when she did that interview.
But it goes back to what we said before. They're responsible for their own choices.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Michael Jackson didn't pluck them out of Australia and force them to come to the United States. They made that choice.
And they seem to be actively chasing him. People keep saying, "Oh, they were grooming Michael Jackson," and people keep getting offended at that term. But I mean, I wouldn't say they were grooming Michael Jackson, but they definitely wanted to be with him, and he was not out searching for little boys like many people claim. If you think that Neverland was created to lure in boys, then you would also think that every boy he meets is a potential victim. Maybe I didn't word that right.
There were hundreds and hundreds of children that came through Neverland, all, you know, boys, girls, black, white.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like, I'm out scouting for little white boys between the ages of 7 and 14.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I believe that's covered everything.
Okay.
Well, thank you
so much
for agreeing to do this and helping and dealing with me trying to figure out technology.
Thank you for putting up with my lack of tech savvy.
No, you were great. It honestly,
did everything
you had to do. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed talking this out. I don't really have anyone in real life to just chat about Michael as if, you know, I know him. So I thank you very much, Raven, for agreeing to this and chatting with me on that.
All right. Thank you.